of getting out of NASA, because that coalition is coming to an end. So the answer is yes, it is our history.
One Kenya Alliance is not just about political parties as they exist right now. It is about all leaders, all Kenyans, from wherever they are, from the north to the south, who believe that this country needs a chance and an opportunity for proper economic rejuvenation to come.
So all kinds of stories here. But the bottom line is that season is here, where people are basically trying to find the best fit. Yvonne likes to call them special purpose vehicles for the election. And basically this is, people are testing different machines and see how they work. And in the end, we'll end up with some things that are a little bit different from what we saw in 2017. It's already clear, Francis, I'll start with you, that it may not be a straight contest between Jubilee and ODM in 2017. That is already clear.
Obviously. But as you say, new formations, but the personalities in those formations are the same. I mean, look around and you'll see those who are in Jubilee are now teaming up elsewhere. Those who are elsewhere are teaming up in Jubilee. So same political story of our lives and our country. Look, even Johnson Sakaja is rooting for ANC. Yeah. Musalia Mudavadi, at least I've seen him
at 2 functions, I think.
Actually more than that. Yeah. He's been going with him for various functions.
To his defense, he's saying One Kenya Alliance.
One Kenya, yes. Jubilee is not part of One Kenya Alliance. Yeah. Yet the Nairobi senator is an elected senator on a Jubilee ticket. He's not alone. I mean, you've seen the same thing happening. Even the members of parliament who are coalescing around UDA are Jubilee members of parliament. So it's that season. I like to call it the political transfer season. It's on, where you belong to team A, but because the season is over, you're training with another team that you hope to join when the signing is on. And that is exactly what you're seeing. Even the One Kenya Alliance team, they say they will pull out of the NASA coalition process. There's a coalition agreement that was signed in the run-up to the 2017 general election. And they said that if 3 of the partner parties opt out of the coalition, then the coalition stands dissolved. Then there was a timeline for that coalition. It was a 5-year term, which obviously ends next year. Now, the challenge is who will bail the cat? Will the political parties, that is Wiper, ANC, Ford Kenya, that are dissatisfied with their ODM partner in NASA, will they gather the courage, write to the Registrar of Political Parties and tell her that now we exit this coalition as we prepare to form another coalition called One Kenya Alliance? And is there a possibility also of the One Kenya Alliance team teaming up again with ODM, maybe under a different kind of a setup? This is the political scenario that we find ourselves in.
But let's face it, I mean, to what avail, Jamila? I mean, you have 12 months almost now to the election, and no one ever dissolves those coalitions formally. Let's go to the registrar, whatever. They basically become victims of the political season. When we get to a certain point, people don't even remember them. People will jump onto the next available vehicle and, you know.
Dissolution by formation.
Yes, I keep remembering PNU. Remember, PNU was the vehicle that President Kibaki used in his second term. And where is it now? Yes, it fielded a candidate in Kiambaa, but who got less votes than the, I think, rejected votes. Yeah. So, and we always say, oh, a year to elections is a long time. We talked about it here now, even with what we've seen in Kiambaa, a lot of things can change in a year. We have coalitions being formed. Which one was that? That was formed in October and won an election in December. Was it NAC?
Well, I mean, all of them. Look, but then, at a time like this in 2007, President Mwai Kibaki did not have any idea what party he was going to run on, because the NAC party that he had run on was basically all but a shell. We had Martha Karua and all these other people tried to form some NAC Kenya thing. At some point, people thought that's what he was going to run on. He didn't run on it. We even had POA, the party that Raphael Tuju founded, that some people thought that was going to be it. Then on 30th September 2007, PNU is
PNU.
being unveiled, and
PNU.
that party became so big, so much so that we actually fought in this country because of PNU and of course ODM on the other side.
Yes, and it's not here anymore. But then, Joe, like he was talking about the OCA.
One Kenya Alliance.
Thank you. One Kenya Alliance. And I was reading a report, and they said that
like
they would...
Okoa Kenya, but it's a
Kenya.
different story.
That they're going to name their presidential candidate in September. And you know, one of the issues that I think they've been grappling with is who will become the presidential candidate in that alliance. We have the four of them. You have Kalonzo, you have Musalia, you have Gideon Moi, and you have Moses Wetangula. But apparently there was a report that a technical team presented to them about how it looks, because I think the four of them believe that President Uhuru Kenyatta is not going to pick any of them as the flag bearer, because it seems like he's leaning towards Raila Odinga, who has not really formally come out to say that he's a presidential candidate. But then now a few issues came out of that report, and I'm going to talk about what their weaknesses were said to be: absence of a coalition leader, insufficient government support, weak parliamentary strength, lack of grassroots connections, and weak organizational structures were seen as weaknesses that are within that alliance. But their strengths are their experienced principles, good geographical spread, established parties, and then they have some offices, they have nationwide acceptability in that they come from different parts of the country. But then now, is that enough? Is that ultimately what is going to be in this alliance? As you said, NASA and ODM, mambo sijui kunaenda. I mean, Jubilee and ODM sijui kumendaje mambo na agreement hapo. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Because I think it was Raphael Tuju who was saying that really there's nothing put down on paper about whether there'll be a Jubilee and ODM alliance going forward. But then now we have all these presidential candidates who've sort of said that they're in the race. Okay, we have Ruto who has said he'll be the UDA candidate. But we have even Dr. Alfred Mutua who has said he'll be in the ballot. We have Professor Kivutha Kibwana who has said it. We've had Kalonzo, we had Mudavadi saying the same thing. But I think for all of them, they're still not decided whether they're going to go in a single party or they're going to join alliances or coalitions and field and be the presidential candidate. So again, we say that things change very quickly. And between now and maybe the last day of when those who want to run for president will be presenting the nomination papers, a lot will happen, and that's maybe then that will know ni nani yuko na nani atakuwa na nani, and nani atakuwa rafiki ya nani ambaye alikuwa rafiki jana leo amekosana. So it will be very interesting to see.
From what Francis said, you know, we still have a long way to go. We're now slightly over a year, maybe a year and 2 weeks to the next election. And just what you were talking about, no doubt coalitions have been the way to go. After the lessons of 1992 and 1997, without a doubt, every election after that, we've had coalitions going up against each other, particularly in the big race for the presidency. 2003, then there's 2007, 2013, 2017, no doubt. But it's something about what happened in the lead up to 2013, you know, in my reading that is just interesting to note about where we are. We are still very far off. So remember, coming out of 2007, there was PNU and ODM that already split, right? ODM, you know, Raila and Ruto are going their separate ways. There is the factor of ICC. Then later, the deputy party leader of ODM at the time, who was Musalia Mudavadi, left ODM. He went and formed UDF, which was a United Democratic Front. The PNU and its affiliate parties split. ODM Kenya's Kalonzo and Uhuru were trying to get into some working plan or an alliance. That didn't go too well. President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was not president at the time, moved to TNA and then entered into an alliance, you know, with URP. And then you remember at that point, Musalia Mudavadi tried to now form an alliance with them because remember the ICC factor was hanging over their heads. He was going to be the compromise candidate. We all know what happened with that.
Some demons came. I mean,
you know, and then he later
they have no right of reply, so we just
right, I know it. So we cannot bring them into the discussion. Later on, Musalia, after being, you know, spun by the two, went on and formed the Amani Coalition, which had UDF, KANU, and New Ford Kenya, which had Musalia Mudavadi as its candidate. There's going to be lots of movement. And then, of course, we had Raila, Wetangula, and Kalonzo forming CORD. In fact, in 2013, there were 4 coalitions that ran: Amani Coalition, Jubilee Alliance, CORD, and the Eagle Coalition, which was run by Peter Kenneth. And then, please note that after the election, there was another post-election coalition agreement between Amani, Eagle, and Jubilee to give them, you know, a majority of seats. Look at all of this that's happening in the run-up to that. Whatever we're seeing now is nothing yet.
It's dizzying.
It really is. So even though they're doing all that SWOT analysis to check and see, you know, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. As Gachuri would tell us, uwanja bado ni mdogo, but what is certain is that there will be coalitions in 2022.
By the way, Jamila, it matters not that someone would say this is a presidential candidate. It happens all the time. I remember, I think 2 months or so before the famous Kibaki Tosha statement on 14th of October in 2002, there was a meeting I covered at the Ufungamano House where Mwai Kibaki, Charity Ngilu, and Michael Wamalwa Kijana basically staged this ceremony to unveil their lineup for that election. And Mwai Kibaki was nominated as the presidential candidate. Michael Wamalwa was to be the vice president at the time. And Charity Ngilu was supposed to be prime minister. Yes. Remember, there was this pledge that there would be a new constitution
in 100
days after that election. And so it matters not. In fact, by the time people went to Uhuru Park, when, Raila, with the LDP, which was basically the breakaway wing from Kanu, they were having some talks with Simeon Achai at Serena, and God knows what happened there. But they left that place, went to Uhuru Park, and Raila Odinga basically said, Kibaki Tosha. And that was really it. And that, it didn't matter at that point that Michael Wamalwa, Charity Ngilu, all of these people had actually been promised. So now, right at that point, it was said now that it was Raila Odinga who was then now promised the post of prime minister. And that was part of the reason why in January of 2003, when President Kibaki named his cabinet, then the ODM people rose up and said, no, we had a deal.
That's not the deal.
Even before the constitution changes, we were supposed to supply you with the names of cabinet ministers. That's what they were called at the time. And I think one of the people, surprise, surprise, Raphael Tuju, who was named by Mwai Kibaki at that point as a minister, was not supposed to be on that list. So whereas he was on the LDP side and all of that, but the LDP people said, no, that was not our choice. And I think that was kind of the beginning of very close working relations with Mwai Kibaki, that even when they split up after the 2005 referendum, someone like Raphael Tuju still remained there. But the bottom line of this really is that right now people up their stakes by saying, I am the presidential candidate here and there. But when the chips are finally down, people have to weigh their options. Can I really go ahead with this? And people will decide whether going it alone will really make sense, or whether it makes better sense to hitch wagons with someone who stands a better chance. And the president, I think, at this stage has a big headache around him, because on the one hand, he has all these people who are saying that, we are working with the president, whether it is those One Kenya Alliance or whether it is ODM and all of that. They all say that they are working with the president, helping with this handshake thing, uniting the country and whatnot. But all of them want this thing. All of them are ambitious. So the president has to figure out how he sorts out that without a major fallout that then would compromise his own succession plan. Because he's quite involved, one would say, in his own succession. And I don't think that he wants to be a bystander. And the fact that he doesn't want to be a bystander, therefore, necessarily means that he has to kind of shepherd all these people, chaperone it to that, all the alliances around him towards where he desires. That's not easy at a time when he is no longer the powerful president that he probably was a couple of years ago. He's going out, and people know that.
You see, Joe, the more things change, the more they remain the same, especially in the political scene. The very same script that was played in 2002 is likely to be played again in 2022, 20 years later. There's a huge possibility about it. And there's a reason. The reason being, all these presidential aspirants, because they are not candidates yet. They are not candidates yet until they are declared so by IEBC. Once they have passed the necessary threshold, they remain aspirants. And so, or even hopefuls, if you may like. There will be very many hopefuls, presidential hopefuls. Every one of them will keep announcing they are still in the race. But there is also the reality on the ground. Because to be a presidential aspirant or a presidential hopeful does not necessarily make you a presidential candidate or make you a president, for that matter. There are very many things to be done to make you a president. And the simple test is, number one, For a country that currently has about 19.6 million registered voters, with a possibility of that number rising to about 25 million if IEBC projections are anything to go by, even suppose they get about 23 million voters, let's say even out of those 23 million, let's say 4 million turn up to vote, you're talking about 19 million people who will be voting. The Constitution tells us the winning presidential candidate must garner more than half of the votes cast. More than half of the votes cast. So any serious presidential candidate must be assured of, in one way or another, garnering not less than 8.5 million votes. That's no mean task. So quite a number of these aspirants, you will start to eliminate them very early in the race, even before the race proper begins. You can look at them and say, do they have enough resources, the right background, the right networks, the right coalitions to give them 8.5 million votes? If not, then they will fall by the wayside gradually. Number one. Number two, there's a realization that no one single candidate is able to amass that kind of a number, 8.5 million votes, on their own. They would have to coalesce with other candidates. They would have to make, proper teams in terms of reaching out to various players in the political scene to be assured of such a huge number of votes. So coalitions are inevitable for any presidential candidate, a serious one for that matter. And that coalition must also be with like-minded, strong political players. Otherwise, you may be a strong candidate, but if you team up with people who are weak, they may not add a lot of value to you. So you're looking at a coalition that has equal players, so to say. Now, the headache will be who becomes the presidential candidate of that team and who becomes the running mate. Because, as it were, if you have, let's say, 5, 4, 6 presidential hopefuls who feel this is their time, 4 of them would have to be told, chill out. Because if the Constitution does not change, if you don't have the 5 positions as proposed by BBI, then you will remain with 2 positions, that of the president and the deputy president. Even if you use the position of the Speaker in the National Assembly, Speaker in the Senate as bargaining chips for this coalition building, you will still end up with 2 people at the helm, the president and the deputy president. So some will have to forego their presidential aspirations and presidential hopes. However, I see a scenario where there will be pre-election coalitions and post-election coalitions. And in the event that we go into a runoff, the situation will get even more complicated. Because imagine a scenario where you have 3, 4 top contenders, serious presidential candidates, then it means the pie will be split very, very largely, so to say. Then inevitably you have a runoff.
I just wanted to add, that obviously from the factors that you've mentioned, no doubt about it, coalitions will definitely be part of our elections. Of course, the stringent rules according to the Constitution, the 50% plus 1, getting half of, 25% in at least half of the counties, plus also, the presidential system, which is requiring a majority in Parliament to be able to push your agenda. And like you said, post-election coalitions are also helpful. I mean, you remember, with Kibaki, I think, when they fell out with after 2007,
2003,
yes, sorry, and then Kibaki teamed up with the KANU to sort of shore up their numbers, like we're saying. So we're definitely going to see that, because that's definitely necessary. Also, the fact that political parties, are largely ethnic based, so you definitely do need support from all of these other regions, which is why you will have, parties and party leaders and kingpins from all of these, and therefore, the formation of a coalition. But one of the things that has been interesting for me to see is the evolution of how these coalitions have been put together. So before the 2010 Constitution, they were not recognized in law, which is why even NAC in 2003 was sort of a body corporate, it was nothing that was governed by law, maybe more of, a gentleman's agreement. And then comes the 2010 Constitution and the Political Parties Act that then provides, a legal framework for coalition, saying, you guys can get into an arrangement, a working arrangement, and deposit those here with us. But where do we find ourselves? Exactly where we are with NASA, fighting over you know, a huge chunk of an amount of money, where ODM is saying, no, hang on a second. The amount of money that we are to share with you, according to our arrangement, is, you know, only for the presidential, because each of the parties within the NASA coalition fielded their own candidates with all the seats. And so those others did not meet the threshold of, is it 20 MPs, 40 MCAs, you know, a number of governors and senators as well. And then ODM on one hand claiming they didn't get money allocated to them on the basis of the presidential vote because the result was annulled by the Supreme Court. And I think, you know, they're saying if there's any money based on the repeat exercise, which they then boycotted, it's a few thousand shillings and we can give you that amount of money. But, you know, you can see where we are with that one. And that's interesting because just the way they were tenuous then is the same way they're tenuous now with the, you know, the Political Parties Act guiding how these parties can work together. And here's a number of reasons why, you know, even in NASA, they will not necessarily, I know, you know, ANC today, you know, ratified it with the party, but as far as lodging it with the Registrar of Parties, for one thing, I think for me, NASA is dead for one reason, that they cannot then field Raila Odinga as a candidate again, according to their own agreement. Raila Odinga has indicated, at least even from his lieutenants, that he wants to run again. He clearly cannot, if he does want to run, do so on a NASA ticket. And like you said, what I foresee is divorce papers, together with a marriage certificate being lodged with the Registrar of Political Parties at the same time a couple of months from now. And remember also, if they go their separate ways, there's a high chance that ODM could now bully the others. Why? Because they agreed on some of those posts based on the coalition agreement for posts in Parliament. Minority leader and their deputy
and whips.
Also in the county assemblies as well. So if they go their separate ways, what happens there? Could we see a position where, like we saw Wetangula being kicked out of his position at the Senate? And ODM could very easily do that. And remember now, they have the Jubilee numbers because of their working arrangement there. So, you know, at the heart of it, I see this happening much later on. There's still talk of NASA is dead, NASA is dead. But as to whether they actually do sign the divorce papers right now,
the other parties have a lot more to lose than ODM does, as you've said. And of course, in terms of the money that you're talking about, it was 519 million that was released by the Treasury. Jubilee getting about 353 million, ODM getting 165 million, and all those factors and all those reasons given by ODM as to why they deserve the money and not the other members of the coalition. But then talking about ODM, I remember that it was a briefcase party, Joe, also, and it makes me think about all those other parties that people have registered on Mekalezo, Makaratasi, Wanangoja too. You talk about regional kingpins and all those. There are a lot of these guys who've gotten parties wamezikalia. Wanangoja tu, ile time itafika una unleash yako ukisema we can get into a coalition because I have this with me. But another group of people who I keep thinking about where they'll go are the second-term governors. In terms of, I think almost half of the ones that are currently sitting are actually on their second term. What's going to happen to them? If the BBI had passed, I'm sure most of them would have gone to run as members of parliament.
Well, it could still pass.
As a president, in fact, when I had this president speaking today, I was saying, okay, you get to Kobado. But most of them, I think, were thinking of running maybe as members of parliament, so they may end up in parliament and maybe become ministers. But then, so what if, let's say, BBI doesn't happen? What happens to these guys? They're going to try and attach themselves to one or two or three of these coalitions because, of course, all of them want that political survival. And then I think finally also we need to look at what's happening in with the campaign meetings that we're already seeing now. Deputy President William Ruto was at the coast area, and so was Raila Odinga. The president is also there. For me, I look at it in terms of now why we are forgetting something very, very important, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. The meetings, any conditions that had been put about meetings, about gatherings, about political gatherings have been thrown out of the window completely. Hakuna mtu anajali. People are meeting as they want to, no masks, no social distancing. And I think it's pretty sad that we're forgetting about this, considering that today we had 13-point-something percent, I think 13.5%, 0.7% infection, and we're still joking
Joe,
around.
by the way, it is important to remind Jamila that ODM is one of the oldest political parties. At least in terms of how our political structure
only
is.
younger than KANU.
Only younger than KANU.
And if you can still say KANU is one of those parties, you know, I mean, KANU, if you compare with what it used to be.
And so the point being, a lot of these coalitions will be made based on what is known, what people are familiar with, as opposed to what people are unfamiliar with. You'll see a lot of coalescing around known leaders, known ideas, known political parties. Number one. Number two, the two main political parties in Parliament are Jubilee and ODM. And so, because the standing orders identify who becomes the minority leaders and minority whips in Parliament, the standing orders are clear. So you basically go back to the numbers and look at how the numbers tally. So if the NASA coalition was to be annulled, properly, legally, formally, then some certain things would happen in Parliament in terms of the leadership, as Yvonne points it out. But thirdly, and most importantly, everybody now recognizes the role and position of coalitions. Yeah. Even Jubilee Party, as we know it today, was a coalition in 2013 between URP and TNA that mutated into a bigger coalition that brought together about 14 political parties. Only that the difference now was that the political parties merged into one major political party. Call it one major coalition, under Jubilee. And some of the feelings that you see thereafter, after the fallout, tell you of how coalitions are structured. You've heard Kiraitu Murungi say there is even a possibility of reviving the bus. You've heard other political parties thinking of how they can, come back. But what I project is a scenario where in Parliament next year, you will see very many independent candidates, and you're also likely to see quite a number of what you call small political parties with members of Parliament. And therein, the question of a post-election coalition. Because for you to have the numbers to push certain business in Parliament, you need numbers, and proper numbers for that matter. So you will see a scenario where a political party with 5 MPs, another one with 10 MPs, another one with 7 MPs will be coalescing around certain interests of the day, so to say. So look at Moses Kuria's political party, PP. Look at another political party by Mwangi Kiunjuri, TSP, look at Sisi kwa Sisi, all those political parties, you will see them fielding candidates. And lastly, remember the 2017 nominations, particularly in Jubilee and ODM, the fallout therein. So there are quite a number of serious candidates who will not want to subject themselves to a nomination. So they will go for safe parties where they are assured of a ticket, and then they prepare for the grand election. And instead of an election before an election. Because in many places, a nomination, especially for a major political party, is an election before an election. True. So quite a number of them will avoid that election before an election and only spare their efforts and energies for one election, the main election.
But it's fair to say right now that this jostling and the uncertainty seems to be only on the other side. It seems to me that the DP is quite settled where he is. Well, I mean, there could well be surprises about UDA and whatnot, who knows, but he does look like he's just about the only presidential hopeful that is kind of sitting pretty, at least insofar as the certainty of getting a ticket and going all the way to the debe, as they say.
Yeah, and I just need to mention that, Jubilee, what will it look like as we head towards 2022? Clearly, from an alliance to now merging all of those parties into one, and then look what they've done with it. They had a caretaker team. Those are supposed to be there for 3 years. Their term expired last year. 2020 March, January actually. They're yet to hold any grassroots elections. We've hardly seen, PG meetings. It's been chaotic for the Jubilee Party. And as to whether they will, or in what form they will exist, on the ballot in 2022, whether they'll be able to field a presidential candidate is something else. And anyway, like I said, SPV, special purpose vehicle, Jubilee did what it was meant to do, which was deliver a second term for President Uhuru Kenyatta. And now that's why everything was so tentative and interim. And like you said, they're hardly going to start to do grassroots elections now with a year to the election.
Will Jubilee field a presidential candidate? Highly unlikely. I see a scenario where the Jubilee Party will team up with other parties, form a coalition that will produce a candidate. Maybe the negotiations will be about how the government will be structured and shared. But now, so far you can say other than, let's say, the deputy president who is almost assured of the UDA ticket, the headache for him, of course, will be the running mate, because the choice of a running mate will also dictate quite a number of things in the political setup, number one. Number two, on the other hand, if ODM was to field a presidential candidate on its own, then most likely that candidate would be Raila Odinga. If Wiper would field a presidential candidate, that candidate would most likely be Kalonzo Musyoka. The same for ANC, the same for Ford Kenya.
Kanu as well.
And even Kanu. So you're starting from the known, moving to the unknown as a result of the coalitions that will be built. So the two principal headaches will be who becomes the presidential candidate. Once you have dealt with that, who becomes the running mate? Because there will be some fallout as a result of one's choice of a running mate.
All right, Jamila always says it.
It's time to take this home, and tonight we start with...
All right.